these last couple of days, I don't know how this even happened, our son Alec, he came up with this story. Like, it was weird. He comes up with the story of getting lost at the store, finding a toy, and then he finds his way out of the store with the toy. And I'm like, dude, you're like 3. You've never been lost because we've always been there with you. So we don't know how he has this story of being lost. But it's frustrating, right, to lose something. It's frustrating to lose something that we love or need, maybe like car keys, maybe losing your phone or misplacing your phone, right? It's really annoying whenever you're trying to leave really fast, but you don't know where you leave things. Maybe your school books, backpack, or keys to that special locker. But sometimes it's not just our phones or homework, but it's us, right? But how do you feel whenever you get lost? Scared, mad, frustrated, happy? Who gets happy? You need Jesus. But now that we can take a look back at all these things, it wasn't fun then whenever we were in those moments of being lost, right? But now that we're talking about it, it's fun, right? It's all, ha ha ha, fun and games. But whenever that happens to you, oh man, right? I don't know if you're like me, but I get frustrated to the point to where like I kind of get mad, and it's funny because sometimes my wife just starts laughing at me. She's like, "What are you doing?" And she knows, and I'm just like mad. I just start throwing stuff, and she's just making fun of me, and I know she's enjoying it, but I'm just so mad, and I know what I'm doing, but because I'm mad, I'm trying to stay in character. And sometimes I know it's like dumb or maybe it's nothing that I should be mad about. But whenever she calls me out on it, I'm just like, leave me alone. Don't talk to me. And a couple of seconds later, I'm like, yeah, you know, she's right. But a lot of us in those moments, we're so frustrated with things, we're so mad. And how do we get whenever we find those things? It's like automatically we get happy. It's automatically like our character, our personality changed completely, right? It's like you were mad, you find your car keys, you find your phone, and it's like, boom, I'm like the happiest person on earth. Like if nothing ever happened before, right? Well, what about our spiritual lives? If we can take a step back at where you're at personally, what about your spiritual life? Are you spiritually lost? I want you to think about this. Have you ever been spiritually lost? Maybe you're saying, well, Pastor Dan, what do you mean spiritually lost? Yeah. Have you ever felt that you've been so far away from God to where you don't feel Him anymore? Has that ever happened to you before? To where you've said, I just don't feel God anymore when I go to church. Or maybe you said to yourself, I've been so far away from God that those things no longer interest me. Going to church doesn't interest me. Reading the Bible doesn't interest me. Listening to Christian music doesn't interest me anymore. I'm a completely different person. But we were created to be close to God. Did you know that? You and me were created to be close to God. Let me tell you why. Because our Creator made us to worship Him. We were born to worship Him. But we were also born to share the good news with other people. To tell others about how great Jesus is. Some of us, if we're to be honest with ourselves, some of us don't know our Creator. We've heard about the things of God, but we really don't know our Creator. Some of us know Jesus, but have wandered off. Some know Jesus, but are struggling in your spiritual life to where you're borderline spiritually lost. How many of you have ever used a GPS before? Yeah? What does it do? Tell you where to go. What else? Fastest route. Directions. It gets you lost. Sure, if you're Stephen, it gets you lost. That's exactly why the GPS was intended to, to get you lost, right? But what else? What else does it do for you? Tells you the time, right? If we were to get on a GPS app right now, it would tell us many things that some of you have already said, like it helps us to avoid traffic. It helps us to avoid roadblocks. It helps us to avoid tolls, depending, on what you want to do. Depending on what app you're using, it helps us to avoid cops, right? It tells us how long it's going to take us to get there from point A to point B. It tells us rerouting whenever you've made a mistake. It tells us rerouting whenever we miss that exit, right? These are all things that these apps are intended to do to make our lives easier, to help us, right? How many of you enjoy those apps? Yeah, especially for those driving, right? But what about if there was an app that did that for our lives? That would be pretty cool, right? To have an app to help us make the right decisions, right? An app that would help us to avoid setbacks. An app that would tell us, be careful, danger, danger, danger close, right? An app that would give us a sneak peek into the future. That would be amazing. I would pay money just to get a sneak peek, into my future, right? That would be phenomenal, right? But what about if there was also an app about our faith? What about if there was an app to tell you, Jaden, you know what? These are the areas in where you're struggling with your faith. This is what you need to do. Luke, this is what you need to do. Nathan, this is what you need to do to get your faith on track. This is where you're at. This is where you need to be. How amazing would that be to have a spiritual app to tell you what to do in your walk with Christ? I don't know about you, but I would pay for that app too. Because that would make my life easier, right? Whenever it comes to our faith, whenever it comes to our spiritual lives, sometimes as a believer, as a human being, sometimes you question and you ask yourself, am I wandering away from the things of God? Am I still passionate for the things of God? Am I getting sidetracked? Is something happening in my spiritual life? And we're wondering what's happening in our lives. And can I be honest for just a couple of seconds? Sometimes we wonder about our spiritual life, and then we wonder, has anyone noticed that I've stopped coming to church? Has anyone noticed that I'm not engaged anymore in the worship? Has anyone noticed that I'm lacking in my spiritual life? And we start to question these things. Has anyone noticed? Has anyone noticed that I'm not feeling it anymore? And if you feel far from God, you start to ask yourself this question. Well, what happened? How did I get there? What happened from last year to where I'm at today? Last year, I was so happy. Winter retreat, woo, it was amazing. I came back on fire. I wanted to tell everyone about Jesus. And then the pandemic hit. And then everything broke loose. I started to lose my mind, my soul, right? With everything that you guys mentioned to me earlier of what you've lost. But if you have your Bibles, I want you to turn with me to Luke chapter 15. verse 1, and we're going to read the Bible tonight here in this passage. And this chapter talks about a lot of things, but it talks mainly about being lost and found. And tonight, that's what we're going to be talking about. In these next couple of weeks, we're going to be starting this new series called Lost and Found. So if you have your Bibles, Luke 15, verse 1 through 7, and it says like this: By this time, a lot of men and women of doubtful reputations were hanging around Jesus, listening intentionally. The Pharisees and religious scholars were not pleased, not at all. They growled, "He takes in sinners and eats meals with them, treating them like old friends." Their grumbling triggered this story. Verse 4, suppose one of you had 100 sheep and lost one. Wouldn't you leave the 99 in the wilderness and go after the lost one until you found it? When found, you can be sure you would put it across your shoulders, rejoicing. And when you got home, calling all your friends and neighbors, saying, "Celebrate with me. I found my lost sheep." Count on it. There's more joy in heaven over one sinner rescued's life than over 99 good people in no one need of rescue. So what is this telling us? I want to focus on verse 2, where it says that the Pharisees were mad. I want to ask this question: why were they mad though? Why were the Pharisees mad though? You see, the reason why the Pharisees were mad is because the Pharisees were religious leaders, okay? There were religious leaders that were so focused on following God's rule. They were like so focused. You know, whenever I play video games, I'm so focused. Like, my wife could ask me anything, and I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, sure. I won't be paying attention. I'm just telling her, yeah, I'm playing FIFA. Scoring a goal, doing my thing, thinking I'm going beast mode. And she's asking me these questions. I'm like, yeah, sure, honey, yeah. I'm busy playing. I don't remember what I said yes to, but I was so laser focused. And here we see how the Pharisees were so focused on following the rules that they missed the opportunity to see the one who came to this world to change it. They were so focused. There were hundreds of laws in the Jewish scriptures. They were so focused. Rule 1, 2, 50, 300, so on. There were so many rules. And there were important rules, by the way. Rules to help people, right? But the Pharisees took it too far. They took it to the next. They became so obsessed that they missed God's heart. They missed the intention of those rules. They were so focused on wanting to obey the rules. They were so focused on obeying the rules, but also the tradition that comes with obeying those rules, that whenever Jesus came to change everything, they saw Jesus as a sinner, because Jesus was breaking all these rules. Jesus was breaking all the traditions. And they were like, who is this man? Who's this guy who hangs out with sinners, who eats with them, who works on the Sabbath? Who does that? No one was doing that during that time. And these Pharisees did not like it. And they became so obsessed that they forgot about the intention of the rules. They missed the heart of why God gave them these rules. And then in verse 3 through 7, it starts telling the story of the sheep. Jesus starts to tell them about, if you had 100 sheep, would you realize that you're missing one? That's a lot of sheep, right? I mean, how many of you have more than 2 dogs? Yeah? How many dogs do you have? 3? How many do you have? 4? 3? Okay. I have two. And sometimes I don't even notice one of them. But can you imagine having 100 sheep or 100 dogs or 100 whatever? Can you imagine if one of them would no longer be there? Some of you, it would take you maybe weeks to even realize that they weren't there anymore, right? Some of you would probably never even realize that you lost an animal. But here, Jesus is telling a story about how this shepherd realized that he lost one sheep. And then I start asking myself this question, well, if this shepherd realized that there was one missing, how well did this shepherd know these sheep? I started thinking, well, he must have named them. Maybe Lammy, maybe Whitey, maybe Fluffy. Whatever weird names you guys name your pets. Our two dogs is Remy and Clancy. Sometimes I forget their names, or sometimes I get their names all into one. But here, Jesus is telling us that this shepherd realized that he was missing one. And because it was missing one, he went out of his way. He went to go find this one sheep. Now, let me put this here on the floor for you guys to understand. Whenever you lose something, you get frustrated, right? But can you imagine losing a sheep? There's a desert. During that time, it was the Judean desert. Can you imagine the effort, the time of having to go find this one sheep? Would you really do it? Or would you say, you know what? As much as I love that sheep, it's fine. I don't want to make the efforts. I don't want to put my resources to go find it. Because it's just one, right? Who needs that one, Alan, right? I got 99, and one ain't one, right? So why am I going to go find this one sheep? But here we see how this shepherd did that. He didn't care about the time. He didn't care about the effort. He went out of his way just for this one sheep. There's this story that I read a couple of years ago, and it's called. There was a sheep who became famous years ago, and this sheep's name was called Shrek. I don't know if you guys have heard of this story, but many years ago, this sheep called Shrek, you can literally Google it. This sheep was in New Zealand, right? It used to have an owner, but it got lost for 6 years. It was wandering around New Zealand doing its thing. But how many of you guys know that animals or dogs, you have to give them haircuts every once in a while, right? In order for them to look good and cute and fluffy and for you to want to play with them, right? Well, this sheep, Shrek, some of you are already Googling it, but this sheep, Shrek, for 6 years did not get a haircut. And whenever they found this sheep, it was up there in the mountains. Like up in the mountains, remote. Like in order for you to get there was like a miracle. So whenever they found this sheep, Shrek, they got this sheep and they tried to get it and they finally got it secured. Well, they realized that Shrek was fluffy. Like really fluffy. And it was so fluffy that it had 60 pounds of wool. 60 pounds extra. It was carrying some weight. All right? Talk about weight. Originally, sheep fur or wool is about 10 to 12 pounds whenever you're supposed to give it a haircut. Well, this sheep had 60 pounds, okay? 60 pounds. You know what? With his wool, they were able to make, they could have made up to 20 suits. That's how much wool this sheep had. So this sheep had 6 times, it was carrying 6 times the original weight because he was away from his shepherd. Whenever they found Shrek, Shrek wasn't walking straight. Shrek wasn't running. You know how he was walking? Carrying that extra weight? He wasn't doing it on purpose. He was doing it because that weight that he was carrying, that extra weight that he had, because he was away from his shepherd, he wasn't doing it because he was trying to have fun, trying to be adventurous. No, he was doing it because he got lost. And because he was lost, he was carrying that extra weight. And he was walking, hold up. I need to take a break. Oh, my back. Oh. Have you ever had those friends where you go walking or go hang out, and then they're always the first ones who say, oh, let's go sit down. Let's take a break. Every 5 minutes, let's take a break. Let's take a break. Let's take a break. Right? Not trying to call anyone out, right? But this shepherd went out of his way for the one. I'm going to ask if the praise and worship team could help me out. In Isaiah 53, verse 6, Isaiah 53, verse 6, it says, we're all like sheep who've wandered off and gotten lost. We've all done our own thing, gone our own way, and God has piled all our sins, everything we've done wrong, on him, on him. So what does this parable mean to us? What is this parable telling us? You know what it's saying? You know what this parable is telling to us about the lost sheep? It's telling us that Jesus is the shepherd and we are the sheep. And he is the good shepherd. That he's willing to go out of his way for your life. He's willing to go out of his way whenever you don't feel like it anymore. He's willing to go out of his way just for you because he cares so much about you. And he loves you so much. I'm going to ask for you to stand to your feet. If you and I are wandering, lost, trying to figure out things of life, Jesus is the shepherd trying to find you. He's trying to find you where you're at. In your spiritual life right now where you're at, he's trying to find you. Maybe you've been saying, you know what, Pastor Danny, I'm just not feeling it anymore. I just don't feel the same going to church. I've lost that passion. Well, Jesus is trying to find you. He's trying to meet you where you're at. He's trying to figure out where you're at. But he's looking for you. He hasn't given up. He's searching. He's waiting for you to give him an opportunity. Jesus is the shepherd, and we are the sheep. Because when you feel lost, Jesus notices you. When you feel like you can't go no more, Jesus is there. And can I give you a secret? You were never lost. It just took Jesus longer to get there to you. You were never lost. He just had to go through some walls, through some barriers, just to get to you that maybe you put there. Maybe you're saying, I'm trying to hide away from the things of God. I'm trying to live my life, do me. But you were never lost. Jesus noticed whenever you took that step back and said, you know what? I'm slowly going to fade out from the things of God. I'm slowly going to fade out and live my life. I used to be up front. I used to be seen, but I'm about to graduate. I want to live my life. I want to blend in like everyone else and hope that no one notices me. But Jesus always notices. And because he notices, he cares about your life. God paid a good price for us with his own blood. And he is the good shepherd who gave his life for his sheep. He cares about you.